So, you want to know how to level an entire battlefield with nothing more than a single strike? Well, let me show you how. Welcome to the Arc Hunter Playbook. The premise of this playbook is simple. Together we will work our way through each building block of the Arc Hunter to understand exactly how to master it. From 60-second supers to one-shotting champions, and god-tier ad clear to certified invincibility, this playbook has everything you need to become legend. As with all good things, we must start with the basics, but that doesn't mean that they are simple by any means. In fact, most players don't even know most of the information I'm about to tell you, and understanding all of the quirks and nuances of your kit is essential to mastering this playstyle. If you don't have a strong foundation to build up from, studying the more complex aspects of the class is pointless. There is no better place to start than with our melee ability, Combination Blow, being consumed on any melee final blow and increasing your melee damage for 20 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. This is a multiplicative 60% damage increase per stack, amounting to a 310% damage increase at 3 stacks. Additionally, when defeating targets with this melee ability, it fully refills your class ability and restores a small amount of health, but there is a simple way we can turn that small amount of health into a fully restored HP bar every single time that we will talk about later in the video. By pairing this with our class ability selection, Gambler's Dodge, which fully refunds our melee charge if used within 8 meters of an enemy, you essentially have an infinitely chaining loop of using our melee to refresh our dodge and using our dodge to refresh our melee. It's worth noting, however, that melees in Destiny 2 can be a bit funky. If you've been playing for any significant amount of time, you have surely experienced your melee tracking to a target but doing no damage, commonly referred to as the melee whiff, which can be detrimental to a build like this. The number one way I have found to avoid this is by making sure that I am always on the same elevation as the target I am trying to hit. These whiffs are most common when trying to attack a target on a different Y coordinate than your Guardian. For larger targets with a center of mass above you, like barrier servitors and bosses, this issue can be remedied by jumping to meet their center of mass before you strike. Moving on to our aspects, Lethal Current is selection number 1, which along with providing 2 fragment slots, also grants our melee attack increased lunge range, a damaging aftershock, and the capability to jolt the target all after dodging. The lunge range is an increase of 2 meters from the base range of 5 up to 7. The aftershock's damage is also buffed by Combination Blow, also being able to deal up to 310% increased damage at max stacks and can kill other nearby enemies with its AoE damage. Additionally, damaging any jolted target that is not a champion or boss with melee attacks will blind them for 10 seconds, inhibiting their ability to attack completely. Speaking of jolted targets, the jolt effect is something that all players have experienced in-game, but most don't truly know the details of how this debuff works. And like I said before, understanding every component of your arsenal is the key to mastering Arc Hunter. Jolt is a debuff applied to a target that can be activated by dealing additional damage to that target, similar to Volatile on Void. Upon activation, Chain Lightning will spread from the jolted target to damage the jolted target, as well as all enemies within an 8-meter radius. This works perfectly in the case of Lethal Current, since the damaging aftershock following our jolting melee will always deal enough damage to proc the Jolt Chain Lightning. Additionally, if the attack that inflicts Jolt also kills the target, the Jolt effect will activate immediately. Our second aspect is Flow State, which along with also providing 2 fragment slots, grants the amplified buff for 15 seconds when defeating a jolted target. Additionally, while amplified, you gain 200% increased base class ability cooldown, 50% damage resistance while dodging, and a very large increase to reload speed. And while we're on the subject, Amplified is a buff universal to Arc subclasses that temporarily grants 50 mobility, 33% increased slide distance, and bonus handling. This buff also allows you to acquire the Speed Booster buff, which is activated after sprinting for 2.5 seconds while amplified. While under the effects of Speed Booster, you are granted a 12.5% increase to your sprint speed, 50% increase to your slide distance, 100% increase to your base jump height, and 15% damage resistance. Additionally, this effect remains active even if your amplified buff runs out so long as you remain sprinting. And you can actually maintain this buff through dodges, slides, and even melees so long as you do not stop sprinting for a full second at any given time. Moving forward, we have our 4 open fragment slots to be filled, which are a lot simpler than our aspects and accompanying effects. The first of these 4 fragments is the Spark of Resistance, which grants a 25% damage resistance buff for 5 seconds, activating or refreshing anytime you are within 15 meters of at least 2 enemies. After that is the Spark of Feedback, which grants our next melee attack 75% bonus damage for 5 seconds upon taking melee damage from another enemy. Next up is the Spark of Magnitude, which grants our lingering arc grenades increased duration. Specifically, it increases the lightning bolts of lightning grenades from 4 to 5, the pulses on pulse grenades from 6 to 8, and the volleys from storm grenades from 2 to 3. Rounding us off is the Spark of Shock, which grants our arc grenades the additional effect of being able to apply the Jolt debuff to afflicted targets. Oh, and now seems like a good time to mention that for this build, I highly recommend the Pulse Grenade. Compared to the rest of the arc grenade options, it provides the most reliable zone control as well as the best damage. For our super, Gathering Storm is the obvious choice. It provides incredible ad clear, top tier boss damage, and with the mod setup I have for you in chapter 3, you'll be getting your super so quickly that you'll be throwing arc spears every 60 seconds. Now before we move on to the next chapter, I do want to mention I am giving away 2 Scientia Illuminata emblem codes. All you have to do to enter is leave a comment below letting me know what you think of the video so far. And you don't have to for the giveaway, but I would appreciate it if you would also consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel, especially if you've learned something new so far. With all that being said, let's talk about the exotic armor piece that will make us invincible. Our base abilities, along with a few mods and weapons, are what allow us to one-shot literally everything, all of which I will show you how to do later in the video. But the exotic armor piece of this build is what grants us the defensive capabilities to become quite literally invincible. The Assassin's Cowl Helmet, obtainable from Ikora Ray after completing the Shadowkeep campaign, grants us invisibility and health restoration with every melee final blow, with finishers and final blows against stronger enemies granting a longer duration of invisibility. Specifically, melee final blows and finishers against minor enemies, aka enemies with a square icon on their health bar, will grant 7 and 10 seconds of invisibility respectively. Those same final blows and finishers against elite enemies, aka enemies with a shield icon on their health bar, will grant 10 and 13 seconds of invisibility respectively. And finally, champions and mini-bosses, aka enemies with a triangle icon on their health bar, will grant 13 and 16 seconds of invisibility respectively. As for the health restoration that also scales with enemy strength, a melee final blow against even a minor enemy will restore full HP and shields from the effects of Assassin's Cowl and combination blow working in tandem, meaning every melee final blow will amount to a full HP bar every time. Additionally, non-charged melee final blows will also activate these effects, so long as you have the combination blow buff. And if that wasn't enough ways to activate your invisibility and health regen, final blows from the damaging aftershock from the lethal current aspect will also proc the effects of Assassin's Cowl. It's worth noting, however, that although final blows from this aftershock do proc Assassin's Cowl, they do not count as a combination blow kill and will therefore not increase or refresh your stacks of combination blow or consume your melee charge. Unfortunately, dealing the final blow to enemies with Jolt will not proc the effects of Assassin's Cowl. However, with how much damage your melee and lethal current aftershock deal, it is incredibly rare for the Jolt to get the final hit on your primary target. Now, I'd be remiss to not briefly mention the alternate exotic option of Liar's Handshake, as I'm sure many might gravitate towards the glass cannon version of this playstyle. I personally recommend against it, and here's why. As we have and will continue to see, Once you get your combination blow ramped up, you can one-shot literally everything that is a champion and under, meaning the extra damage from Liar's Handshake is irrelevant in most situations. The only time you would actually need the extra damage from Liar's Handshake is for a boss. But as you'll see later in the video, that extra damage only amounts to a 30% overall increase given the glove's poor synchronization with the weapons we will be talking about in Chapter 4. When it comes to picking between a 30% damage buff or borderline invincibility, I'll be recommending the latter with Assassin's Cowl every time. And along with our Assassin's Cowl, we have some mod pairings and stat builds that can make us even stronger than we already are, leading to infinite grenades, absurdly quick supers, and even more invincibility. Mods and stats are what will take this already incredible build to the next level, but build crafting can be a bit meticulous, so I've taken the liberty of making your life a little bit easier. In the description and pinned comment of the video, you can find a Destiny item manager link for each of the 3 mod loadout options I've constructed that will automatically equip these aspects, fragments, and mods, assuming that you own all of them. No need to say thanks either, you can just tap the like and subscribe buttons while you're down there instead. Each of these 3 mod loadouts are carefully curated for different purposes and playstyles. The first is designed specifically for beginners to the build, while the second focuses on empowering your teammates with instant supers, with the third and final mod configuration focusing on yourself and infinite grenade uptime. Nonetheless, having them equipped is only 10% of the equation. Understanding what they do and how to utilize them is what will make us a god. Like I said in the intro, I will not be discussing seasonal mods in this section. I encourage you to utilize them where you can, but by no means is any seasonal mod required for this build. This loadout stands the test of time. Additionally, these mods do in fact take this build to a new level, but in the event you are lacking any or all, don't sweat it, you'll be just fine. Just keep running the base version of this build until Ada1 sells that missing mod, or until Bungie implements a better mod acquisition system. Now, despite having 3 different mod setups, they all share a common trait in running hands-on on an Arc helmet, impact induction on solar gloves, and 2 copies of Bomber on a solar class item. Hands-on is a 3 energy Arc helmet mod that grants increased super energy from melee kills, with the bonuses increasing with tougher enemies defeated. Impact induction is a 3 energy solar arms mod that refunds a percentage of your grenade every time you deal melee damage, specifically 20% with an activation cooldown of 7 seconds. It's worth noting, however, that in activities like Grandmaster Nightfalls, you'll have to either give up this mod or your 10-point stat bonus mod in favor of champion weapon mods. Once you add the other mods we have in this build, there just isn't enough energy for a major stat mod, a combat mod, impact induction, and champion mods. The last of our universally used mods is Bomber, a 2 energy solar class item mod that restores a percentage of your grenade every time you dodge. This is a 14% refund with 1 copy and 18% with 2. And considering that our core combat loop is melee dodge, this happens quite often. Now, most of our mods in our 3 different setups revolve around elemental wells. Elemental wells are basically miniature elemental orbs that recharge your regular abilities instead of your super. They last on the ground for 20 seconds, and when picked up, refund 10% of your lowest charged ability, or 10% of all abilities if the element of the well matches your currently equipped subclass. Since with this build, all of our elemental wells will be Arc, they will all refund 10% energy to all of our abilities. The mod we will use to generate these elemental wells in all 3 of our builds is Melee Wellmaker, which will spawn an Arc elemental well every time you kill an enemy with a powered melee. This also includes melee kills while your melee ability is down, so long as you have the combination blow damage buff. Another mod that will exist in all 3 of our mod configurations is Well of Ions, which gives us a damage increase to our next melee hit after picking up an Arc elemental well. Specifically, it increases our next hit by 30%, with the buff being consumed on hit. The final mod that will reside in all 3 builds is Bountiful Wells, which grants an additional elemental elemental well spawn with each elemental well generation, and another well for every duplicate copy of an elemental well generation mod you have equipped. To specify, Melee Wellmaker will generate 1 elemental well, equip Bountiful Wells and that jumps to 2, throw on another Melee Wellmaker and you're at 3, and slap on another and you're at 4. Now let's talk about the differences between our 3 mod configuration options and the unique mods each one sports. The first is designed specifically for beginners who are new to the build and don't want to worry about picking up all of the generated elemental wells on top of learning the basics of the kit in practice. As such, I recommend Seeking Wells, a 2 energy arc mod that will pull generated elemental wells to you. Along with Seeking Wells on an arc chest piece, you'll have Well of Ions on the boots, Bountiful Wells on your class item, and a copy of Melee Wellmaker on both your gloves and helmet, allowing for a scavenger mod on your boots and reserves or resists mods on your chest. Given that you have 2 copies of Melee Wellmaker along with Bountiful Wells, every powered melee final blow will generate 3 elemental wells that will track to you thanks to Seeking Wells. The only hiccup with this is caused by the invisibility granted to us by Assassin's Cowl, which can sometimes bug out the tracking on Seeking Wells. However, this is not a huge issue considering you will only be running this mod loadout as a beginner, after which you'll move to either the team-focused mod loadout or the self-focused mod loadout. The team-focused mod loadout drops Seeking Wells and 1 copy of Melee Wellmaker in favor of 2 new mods to generate an ocean of orbs for our teammates. The first of these is Elemental Charge, a 2 energy neutral mod that grants a stack of Charged with Light on Elemental Well pickup, granting 2 stacks if the element of the well matches the element of our subclass, which of course it always will. You can spend these stacks of Charged with Light via Striking Light, a 5 energy arc mod that consumes a stack of Charged with Light upon defeating an enemy with swords or melee damage and spawns an orb of power for your allies. By having this on an arc chest piece along with 1 copy of an arc resist mod, you also activate the secondary perk of this mod, Uncatchable, which grants 25% damage resistance while sprinting. For this mod setup, I recommend the same mod layouts on your helmets, boots, and class item as before, with Elemental Charge slotting into the gloves and Striking Light and an Arc Resist mod fitting into an arc chest piece. This mod setup takes full advantage of your constant melee killing loop by generating elemental wells with every melee kill, which grants stacks of light when picked up, which generate an orb on your next melee kill, along with another elemental well to continue the loop. But sometimes you want to be the star of the show, throwing grenades just seconds apart from each other. For that, you'll simply run the same helmet, boots, and class item mod layouts as before and throw a copy of Melee Wellmaker on both your gloves and chest. This nets us a total of 4 elemental wells per melee kill, which amounts to a 40% refresh to our grenade. Factor in our additional refreshes from Bomber and Impact Induction, and you'll have a grenade up after every single melee kill. And like I said before, I have Destiny Item Manager link templates down below that you can use to automatically copy and curate all 3 of these mod setups to work with your specific armor set. I also made sure to have all elemental armor piece recommendations identical in each setup to allow you to use the same armor set for all 3, being able to switch the mods around with just a single click. But all of these mods are only half of the story. Our stat layout is incredibly important when it comes to the success of this build. The first stat you want to max out is Resilience, given that we are in close quarters combat 100% of the time. Having 40% passive damage resistance in conjunction with all of the other resists that this build grants just makes sense. After Resilience, we want to max out our Discipline to reobtain our grenades as quickly as possible. The other ability we want to reobtain as quickly as possible is our Super, leading us to prioritize Intellect third. The final stat you want to go for in the top half of the stat bracket is up to you. Both mobility and recovery can be argued to be a bit useless, since our dodge cooldown, which is tied to mobility, is instant from our melee kills, as is our HP bar refill from Combination Blow and Assassin's Cowl. However, recovery has its merits in those rare situations where you might be forced to play far away in the fight, and mobility can be warranted in circumstances where you accidentally waste your dodge by using it too far away from enemies. As such, I would recommend mobility in 4th place for the beginners and recovery instead for the more experienced users. Now that you know exactly how to build your one-punch super soldier, let's show you the weapon pairings that turn your arc fist into a nuclear bomb. In Destiny, players will typically run a primary, special, and heavy weapon for a whole slew of reasons, the main two of which are consistent ad clear and special ammo economy. However, with this build, every single enemy in the game, aside from explosive enemies and bosses, dies to your melee ability, something that has infinite ammo in its own right. As a result, aside from stunning champions in Grandmaster Nightfalls, something you can have your teammates do from range anyway, a primary weapon is borderline useless in this build. This allows you to run double special without suffering any of the usual consequences like low ammo and unreliable ad clear, since your melees make up for it entirely, resulting in loadouts that can pack potent sustained damage, single target burst, and long range burst for targets that you can't melee. One of these two special ammo weapons will always be a shotgun with the perk 1-2 punch, which increases the damage of your melee for a brief duration after landing every pellet in a shot. Specifically, this increases your melee damage for 1.22 seconds, which is enough time for 2 melee attacks, by 100% against all normal enemies and 150% against bosses and vehicles. Once you stack this buff with Combination Blow ×3, Spark of Feedback, and Well of Ions, you are in for a whopping grand total 1,391% damage buff against normal enemies and 1,763% damage buff against bosses and vehicles. And that's not all. 1-2 Punch also buffs the damage of your lethal current Aftershock as well, allowing you to altogether deal approximately 1/3 damage with just the pull of a trigger, 2 melees, and 1 Aftershock in just over a second to any enemy in the entire game. Legitimately mind-blowing. Now is also a good time to point out the reason I firmly recommend Assassin's Cowl over Liar's Handshake, and that reason is that while you have cross counter active, you only receive a 40% melee damage bonus from 1-2 punch. So even though you get extra melee damage from the exotic itself, it only barely beats out Assassin's Cowl with its 150% buff from 1-2 punch, and trading all of the survivability offered by the Cowl for a 30% damage buff against bosses with Liars is simply not worth it in most cases. The two special weapons I absolutely love to pair with an energy 1-2 punch shotgun are Witherhoard for situations where you want long-term sustained damage on targets too dangerous to melee, or Arbalist for situations where you need to break barrier champion shields and match game elemental shields. Link these up with the linear fusion rifle in the heavy slot, and you have the tools to annihilate just about anything anywhere. Additionally, should you ever get into a situation where you find yourself low on special ammo, while running double special, enemies are more likely to drop special ammo bricks when defeated while your heavy weapon is out, even if you do not kill them with the heavy weapon itself. This same idea also holds true for holding a special weapon to encourage more heavy drops as well. In the event you are not running double special, wielding your primary weapon while getting kills will encourage more special ammo drops also. With these abilities, aspects, fragments, exotics, mods, stats, and weapons, there is absolutely nothing in the game that can stand up to you. Now is the time to show you how to put it all to use and become invincible. Now that you have assembled your perfect Arc Hunter, allow me to show you how to execute it to perfection. Throughout your journey growing as an Arc Hunter, you will pass through 3 stages of experience, beginning as the Duelist. In this stage, you're still getting a feel for how much damage your melees do against various enemies and various activities. You'll learn which enemies you can one-shot with a base melee, which enemies require a damage buff like feedback, ions, or a stack of combination blow, and which enemies require an introduction to your 1-2 punch shotgun. As a duelist, you will begin to understand how to get your buff stacking safely by prioritizing the weakest enemies as you work your way into fights. You'll begin to become comfortable being in the center of danger, learning to remain calm and collected as you select which target to prioritize next. It is likely, however, that you will make a few mistakes, such as using your dodge immediately after a melee, only to see that you killed everything from Jolt and didn't get your melee ability back. You might also struggle to make good use of your grenades, super, and elemental wells, requiring a bit of assistance from seeking wells in the beginner mod configuration. All of these things, however, will begin to become familiar with practice and experience, at which point you will become the Berserker. As the Berserker, you are relentless, chaotic, and bloodthirsty. If it moves, you will punch it, and it will explode with a confetti of arc beams so beautiful yet deadly at the same time. Although you lack restraint, you have become comfortable with your melee damage ranges. You know exactly what enemies to strike to begin your combination blow stacking, when to use your shotgun to prep a tankier foe, and dang do you look mesmerizing doing it. Your very strength, however, is also your greatest weakness. Learning when to retreat is a concept you have no familiarity with, and as a result, you will, on occasion, find yourself behind enemy lines with no means for an invisibility refresh and suffer an inevitable death. Nonetheless, your environmental awareness has improved significantly. You are making good use of your grenade and super when available, and constantly picking up well after well to have a constant barrage of melee damage boosts. In time, you will learn to match your chaos with order and your bloodlust with restraint, and it is at this time that you will become the Reaper. The Reaper is the personification of an Arc Hunter that exhibits perfect harmony between well-timed elegant arc strikes in conjunction with the discipline of a trained assassin. You are no less deadly or lethal than that of your former Berserker self, simply more reserved as to not put yourself in danger. You strike from the shadows, with each arc blow cloaking you once more as you send lightning across the battlefield. Enemies cannot defeat you, they cannot shoot you, and they cannot even see you. A Reaper understands all of the tools in their toolkit. They understand when to weave grenades and arc spears beautifully into their melee onslaughts. A fully stacked combination blow, Well of Ions empowered, lethal current enhanced melee is delivered to every enemy in order. The invisibility timers of Assassin's Cowl are taken full advantage of, with the Reaper utilizing finishers for extended invis duration as they move across larger battlefields. But the Reaper understands something fundamental about the battlefield that they did not see in their past forms. Their goal is to eradicate any enemy force, yes, but they also understand the push and pull their offensive and defensive forms must exhibit as the battle goes on. With many enemies comes many targets for health and invisibility refreshes, during which the Reaper can be quick, destructive, and ruthless. However, as the fight prolongs and the enemy ranks fall in number, the Reaper understands that subsequently there is less fuel on the field to refresh cooldowns and buff timers, and as such must become more calculated in their play, even opting to retreat to regroup and reassess if necessary. A Reaper also understands that they are not a one-man army, but rather a frontline ghost looking to clear the arena of any danger as their long-range teammates clear explosive enemies, stun champions, and laser down bosses in complete safety thanks to your cloaked arc fist. The combat patterns of the Reaper exhibit something akin to a song and dance. It is harmonious, rhythmic, calculated, and beautiful. So here you arrive, at the summit of your journey as an Arc Hunter. But to cement yourself in legend forevermore, you must take one final step. Knowing how to play the part of a perfect Arc Hunter is important, but looking the part is equivalently so. So here are some certified S-tier fashion setups for you to copy, tweak, and modify to your heart's content. And if you want to take your Arc Hunter fashion outside of the game, I've got some Arc Hunter Playbook themed apparel linked in the description below. I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed making it, and would certainly appreciate your consideration and giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Good luck in your Arc Hunter journey. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.